Hi everyone, I'm Rochelle and welcome to my channel where I make videos on integrating the Montessori method with our Catholic faith at home. So today's video looks a little different because today I'm going to be interviewing Adrienne. And Adrienne is our Catechesis of the Good Shepherd coordinator where we live in Idaho. And Adrienne and I have been working together the last 6 months. I was recently trained to be a level 1 catechist for Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And since I've been getting to know Adrienne, you have been doing so much with the program. And it's just clear to me that your passion, your enthusiasm for Catechesis of the Good Shepherd it's really amazing to see. And I thought it would just be fun to have you here today so that we could talk about all things Catechesis of the Good Shepherd and really just share our love for the program. And you've been doing Catechesis of the Good Shepherd since 2017.
Yep.
So now 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then when you were training to be a level 1 catechist, but you're also trained to be level 2.
Correct. Yes. I recently was trained to be a level 2 catechist. I'm like 90% done.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's a big training. There's a lot to go through, a lot to learn.
It's a lot of hours.
Maybe we should go ahead and explain for those who are viewing today. Maybe we should explain what Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is, what an atrium is, and just kind of give an overview of it, just because I feel like some people listening, might have heard about CGS. Maybe they kind of have an idea of what it is, but maybe they're not quite well versed in it. So if you don't mind explaining.
And we use a lot of interesting words.
That's so true.
What are these words that we're using?
It's true.
Okay, so Catechesis of the Good Shepherd was started by 2 lay women in Rome in the 50s. They were inspired by Maria Montessori's work, and they used her methods and her planes of development to develop a catechesis program for children. And they had a lot of trial and error, honestly. They would say they would try something, it wouldn't work, it wouldn't speak to the kids, they couldn't do it, and so they'd toss it and they'd try again. And they built it in this special room called the atrium. We call it an atrium. The atrium in the history of the church is the courtyard where we prepared the catechumens before they entered the church. And so that's why we call it, because it's a space for the children to be prepared. Every single thing, from table size to shelves to artwork, where I hang the artwork, it's lower so the children can see it.
Right.
Everything is for them. Yeah,
and that's what really drew me to CGS is, already doing Montessori in our own home. It's really beautiful to see that there is a faith-based program that is also using, the Montessori method. So maybe we can touch on that then too, is how is CGS Montessori? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, but can you explain more? I mean, I've heard that there's practical life work, right? I mean, when we're working with the kids, there's a lot of practical life work. So Ben, maybe you can elaborate more on that.
The atrium is made for the children. The works were inspired by Maria Montessori. Maria Montessori was Catholic,
right?
Which is lovely to always know.
Yeah.
She was Catholic, and the works for the children, the practical life orients them to all the other presentations. So in the atrium, when I use the term works, it's usually a physical representation of something based in scripture, Catholic doctrine, liturgy, or tradition.
Okay.
Right.
Yep, that makes sense.
So for example, we have a special diorama for the Annunciation.
Okay.
And we have this little house and these sweet, beautiful figures of Mary and Gabriel. And then we pull it out for the children to have a physical representation of the scripture that we're reading. So then they can see it and not just imagine it, right? And then they come back to work with it and they do it again. Sometimes we read the scripture again. Sometimes they just like to sit and meditate on it. So that's an example of a work. That's an example of a work that's based in scripture. So when we have practical life, it's associated to any of the presentations, the other liturgical presentations we have in the atrium. When the children are pin punching, they're practicing fine motor skills for tracing or for writing scripture, right? Just a little thing. What else do we have in there?
So there's, I mean, just kind of, you know, like since I've been working in the level 1 atrium, a lot of the practical life stuff is stuff that you would find in a Montessori classroom.
Correct.
I mean, for example, I noticed that there's scooping and there's pouring work, like you're pouring rice or scooping beans or pouring water. And you even have a water pitcher for the child to then fill up their own water and practice actually pouring to a line, for example. There's, like you said, there's pin pricking. There's even plant care. And so a lot of these you would just find in a Montessori classroom. And yet I remember when I was doing my training, I was thinking, you know, I was like, wow, it's really beautiful because you have all this faith-based work, all these tangible, hands-on, faith-based work that is, you know, has a presentation associated with it. And then the child, I remember learning in our training, and then the child can go to the practical life and really meditate on that presentation that they just heard in a way that's developmentally appropriate. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I remember learning that in the training and thinking how beautiful it is to kind of tie in this practical life work that a child loves to do in a way that is kind of leading them towards early stages of contemplation, because they are contemplating what they just learned from the Annunciation, for example, like you mentioned, and then scooping beans, which seems
simple. It seems simple and silly. Like, why are you scooping these beans back and forth for 40 minutes? But they need to, and that's very common in the level 1 child.
Oh, right.
They're very quiet. They're very naturally contemplative, even though we don't see that at home. Often in the atrium they are, and so yes, they will pour rice for a very long time.
In your experience, what makes Catechesis of the Good Shepherd different from other catechetical programs that a parent might be looking into?
The parent is the primary educator. They are the ones that are supposed to be teaching the faith at home. Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is not a magic bullet. It's not going to cover every single thing, right? That is in this beautiful, huge faith, right? It's so rich. There's so much. So we are trying to take what is very essential. If you think, do you expect your children to learn everything about the Catholic faith from 3 to 12 years old?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you're on a journey. This is a lifelong journey. And we want the children to build relationship. That is such an important part of our faith, right? Building relationship with Jesus. It's even scripturally based.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
People came to him and they said, oh, Jesus, we've been casting out demons in your name. He's like, I don't know you. They're like, but we've been casting out demons in your name. He's like, I don't know you. We want the children to develop a relationship and that sense of how vast and beautiful and rich our faith is. So we want them to continue to learn. We don't want them to just stop. They, like if your child was standing in front of Jesus right now, do you think he would ask them something like, do you know line 1633 from the Catechism? No, he wouldn't. He would want them to know him. And for that young child, relationship is important.
Yeah. So then in your opinion, the most important aspect, the one that kind of separates CGS from any other catechetical program, is the fact that you're helping the child to develop the most essential aspect, which is developing their relationship with Christ.
Yes, developing their relationship with Christ.
Which, most catechetical programs, it's straight out of a textbook.
Right. It's memorization.
It's memorization. Right.
And that is not very fun for most children. You have those special ones that really love it. And they're like, I want to memorize, all these different things. But most kids don't enjoy that as much.
No, for sure. I mean, I mean, come on. Imagine as a child walking
Yes.
into an atrium,
Mhm.
you see everything is set up at their level. It's like
Yes.
hands-on materials.
Mhm.
I mean, one thing that I love about Catechesis of the Good Shepherd too that makes it stand out is the fact that it's developmentally appropriate at their age. I mean, for a 3 to 6-year-old to walk into that atrium, I mean, it is at their level. And it's really beautiful to see, because what ends up happening is they actually they use all of these tangible means to actually understand their faith more.
Yes.
So I find that the kids can actually tell you all about the Annunciation, all about the presentation, you know, I mean, all about the Good Shepherd. I mean, there's all of these presentations that they're able to articulate their faith in a much better way than perhaps a child who is just learning out of a textbook. Because like you said, it's just rote memorization.
Mhm.
It's not grabbing onto their heartstrings.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. I had a catechist tell me this really beautiful story about a little girl they experienced in the atrium, and she was sitting at the atrium and she looked like she was just coloring a picture.
Okay.
But we have all this artwork on the walls. And she's coloring, and then she starts talking. She's talking quietly, and she's looking up a little bit, and she's talking and talking and talking. And the catechist is just sitting quietly observing. And she realizes that she's having a conversation with this beautiful Mary picture that's on the other side of her. And so she looks like she's drawing this picture, but she's talking to her, and she's hearing little bits and pieces of this sweet conversation. And so that's what we're trying to foster, right? Another thing that's very important to the child, the level 1 child. Mostly I will talk about the level 1 child.
Okay. And level 1, just to clarify for those who are watching, is for 3 to 6-year-olds.
Correct.
Right.
It's for 3 to 6. And then level 2 is 6 to 9. And then level 3 is 9 to 12.
Yeah. So if you were interested in doing Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, you could really do it from 3 to 12.
Yes.
Do they have even younger than 3? Is that right?
They do. They just started toddler atrium.
Oh, okay. So you could do it from toddler all the way to 12. Wow.
Yeah. They just started. They just developed a program to help those sweet little ones in there. Yeah. But the level 1 child, what's very important to them is relationship also. So movement, but relationship. And so the center of our atrium is the Good Shepherd, is the parable of the Good Shepherd and how much he loves his sheep. And they are drawn to that. It's on a table in the middle. It's supposed to be seen as soon as they come in. And often the children, they just flock to it. Not to use a sheep term, but
right.
They do. They love it. And it's beautiful. And it's them, a space developing their relationship with Jesus, with the Good Shepherd.
And that's how Sophia and Gianna kind of came to understand, you know, like you were saying earlier, how they were kind of throwing things out as they were coming to understand the developmental needs of the child, but in a spiritual way.
Right. And
they saw that if a kid is drawn to relationship, then the Good Shepherd, for whatever reason, is really calling to them, you know, maybe from the perspective of an actual shepherd. You know, the shepherd is calling the sheep, and the sheep know his name and know his voice. And so a child is really identifying with that. Some people might question, like, do I really need to have my 3-year-old go into an atrium? Is that maybe too young? And I think if you're doing Montessori at home, you know, this question might not concern you too much, but I think because, you know, we are kind of teaching our children at a really young age, but I have heard that before, that maybe you should wait until, you know, the age of reason, you know, 6 or 7 kind of thing instead. I don't know if you want to touch on that. Why start teaching the faith at such a young age?
Sure. I mean, we started before that, right?
Yeah.
We go to Mass with a baby in utero.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
We start even earlier. We start teaching the faith so early at home with our beautiful artwork and...
Yeah, it's true.
All the things at home.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
But starting them at that young age, they're ready for it. And that's what Sophia and Gianna saw, that these little kids are actually ready and desire this beautiful time. Also, I mean, I know that they may not fully remember, but muscle memory even, right? They go in there and they have this long period of prayer time, right? Of work, of hearing the scriptures. And they do develop just a sense, like a baseline. Because then they go into level 2 and they see this again. They see all of this again. They hear the words and we just dive deeper into scripture, into liturgy. So
it's beautiful. If I were a parent hearing all this, I mean, you're selling me, because to me, I would want my child to have this ability to have, you know, this special time that's just for them, to help develop that relationship with Christ. Maybe you can share an experience of how you've seen that in a child making connections of their faith through a presentation, or maybe later on. I don't know if you can think of an experience like that you might want to share.
Sure. So one of my favorite presentations is actually the parable of the mustard seed. I really enjoy it because a real mustard seed is not like what we go buy at the store, like stone ground mustard.
Yeah.
It's so much tinier.
So small.
The tiny mustard seed that Jesus was talking about is like a tiny piece of sand, like the tiniest. And I really enjoy seeing the children's eyes when we get it out, because I read the scripture first and I say, I have a mustard seed. Would you like to see one? And they always say yes. And I say, would you like to hold it? And they go, yes. And we put it on their sweet little hand. And usually they drop it. Right. And so then we have to get another tiny seed out because it's gone in the carpet. And we get a seed out and they hold it and they are just awestruck. They are awestruck. They sit there with this tiny seed, and one little child goes, this is so tiny. And I said, yes, this is a very tiny seed. And they go, was Jesus this tiny in Mama Mary's belly? Was Jesus this tiny? And I was like, yeah, Jesus was this tiny in Mama Mary's belly. And they sit and they're real quiet for a while. And we just sit there. And that's the point. The awkward silence, the wondering, that's okay.
Okay.
And you have to just be okay with that, because Jesus would be okay with that. He would be okay with sitting there quietly with us, right? That's what I always like to think. He would be okay with us. And after a while, the little one goes, I'm pretty small. Yeah. Go, I could be big like Jesus. And so I could see the cogs turning of, my faith is tiny, but I can have big faith also. And they just continued to think about it, and they were so quiet. And then I let them take the mustard seed home on a card, right? Take a little piece of tape and get it off their hand, and put it on. And so if we're not okay with the quiet wondering and those pondering questions, wondering whose power is in that tiny seed. Who gave us this tiny seed? And if this seed can grow into such a big bush, what else can it do? Whose power can make us grow big?
I have a few friends who have asked me along the way who really want to do Catechesis of Good Shepherd for their own children. Yet, you know, just kind of have some maybe reservations, which I think are more just misunderstandings of what Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is all about. Because when you really dive into it the way we are, you really start to realize how beautiful it is and how it's well-rooted. But some of the questions that I've been asked from these friends of mine who do have some reservations are things like, you know, some people think that there might be kind of a lack of theological substance in the curriculum itself. So for example, you know, Catechesis of the Good Shepherd doesn't directly teach, as far as I understand, doesn't directly teach about the Trinity. Which, you know, you would think that that would be an essential aspect that you would teach in any catechetical program. Another thing that has been brought up to me is like, well, things like even just learning the prayers, learning about, learning how to say the Hail Mary, for example, or learning about the rosary. I mean, these are really essential aspects of our faith that I feel like, they're not directly taught in CGS. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, because part of me thinks, well, I think that is really, I don't necessarily see it as something that's missing as much as I see it as, maybe CGS in itself is really just focusing on other aspects of the faith. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to just elaborate on that.
Well, let's remember that as parents, mm-hmm. we are the first catechists. We are the ones that are supposed to teach the faith in the home, right? Going once a week to atrium is not going to be enough. You have to be living this life at home, right? Your Catholic faith. And often when the children are well catechized at home, mm-hmm. you don't have to fill in all these little gaps. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm backing up. I am obliged to teach what my bishop asks. And so the Bishop of Idaho has asked that the children learn the Hail Mary, the Our Father, and these prayers. So there's been a creation of works for this, for these gaps that he wants us to fill in.
Okay.
And we just kind of morph some things. And as you grow as a catechist, you learn how that looks, right? How can you make this? And you talk with other catechists. So you do fill in those gaps. But with a little child, mm-hmm. That's not as essential for them to learn, right? As they get bigger, they will continue to learn that. But we focus in level 1 on what's very, very essential. Every single presentation in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is rooted in Scripture, Catholic doctrine, the Catechism, right? Tradition, or liturgy.
Yeah.
I think I didn't miss any.
No.
But it's everything. Every single thing is rooted in that. And you can see that in our album pages, which are the special the curriculum that we write as we go through training. Mm-hmm. So it's all rooted in very, very Catholic history. So with the most essential presentations for this child, we know that they love relationship. And so that's why a lot of the presentations are focused on relationship, but also focused on like Scripture, Jesus's life, right?
Salvation history.
Salvation history.
Cool. If there are parents out there who are considering Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for their own children, but maybe they live in an area where there isn't an atrium, mm-hmm. How could you do some of these aspects at home? Is that possible? Could you mm-hmm. do Catechesis of the Good Shepherd in your own home, especially mm-hmm. if you're homeschooling? And I don't know, do you have any ideas for that?
Absolutely. So first they would go and you can look up an atrium online at cgsusa.org.
Okay.
And then you can say, find an atrium near me.
Okay.
And if there is none, there is training opportunities all over the U.S. at any given point, really. And you can find that. So, for example, my sister actually has an atrium in her basement. She built an atrium.
Oh, wow.
Yes, in her basement. And she just is lovely.
For her own family or for other families too?
And other families as well. Okay. So, she does it in combination, but she does. She takes her children down there. There's also, as you develop, just going through training has really changed the way I mother my children. And like I said, all these wondering questions, all these ways that I speak to them about their faith. So that's another way. We do a lot of CGS-esque things in our home when we read the Scriptures. My kids, sometimes it drives them crazy because they'll be ask me something. They go, I wonder what Jesus was talking about there. And they'll be like, Mom, wondering. And I go, and really, the wondering statements are to spark a conversation. Mostly it's with my older kids, right?
That's
to spark a conversation. Yeah. And then so they can kind of dive deeper and tell me what they're thinking and what I'm thinking about this and how,
It's beautiful. No, I love that idea from a homeschooling perspective. When you're teaching the faith, like, I love that. Just helping them to really dive deeper and think about what they're hearing, as you're reading out scripture. So that's really beautiful.
Lectio, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And obviously, like, you could set up a little prayer table. I mean, that could be another idea. You could set up a prayer table and where the child can actually help to, snuff the candles, or you could have, you could set out different prayer cloths for the different liturgical seasons of the year. I mean, there are many things that I think a family could do. Adrienne, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a joy to talk to you all about Catechesis of the Good Shepherd.
Thank you so much for having me. It has truly been wonderful to be here.
So if you liked today's video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss a new video, which I do try to post every other week. Thank you again for coming to my channel, where I make videos on integrating the Montessori method with our Catholic faith at home. Thank you again, and God bless.